Hi, I'm John F. Allen. And I'm R.J. Sullivan. And we're the Two Towers.
It's very cool.
And again, if you'd gone back and told me when I was watching Trouble Dribbles as a kid, oh, one day you're going to be in Scotland having lunch with David Gerald. Okay, but
Yeah.
ending the World Science Fiction Convention.
So, I feel like it, when you and I have talked and we've gotten into discussions, it is very frequently about monster movies and very much about Universal monsters and that sort of thing. And you have that same kind of deep knowledge base. Probably, I'm sure more than me. And I feel like it's something I've been kind of informally studying my entire life, and I love talking about them. So I'm really excited that you have also agreed to talk about one of the Universal monster films, one of the few one of the few left still showing on Peacock. I hope that changes next month. But The Raven, 1935, with Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff, is what we ultimately agreed to discuss, so that we could tie this into the article you wrote for Musings on Monsters, Observations on the World of Classic Horror. So I guess, are we ready to transition, John?
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. So let me start. Let me set this up a bit with Greg's article here. He wrote for this publication, which you can check out on Amazon and find under the title Musings on Monsters, edited by Rich Handley and Lou Tambone. Boris and Bela, the best of fiends. And, as you point out, legend has it, these two actors hated each other. That's always been kind of the rumor and the talk, even though I agree with you. There's really not a whole lot of actual evidence to that. But you start off going through, you summarize their career quite nicely, and then you go into the movies that they made together. And first you talk about The Black Cat, 1934, which was Bela Lugosi's second Edgar Allan Poe titled movie, if I'm not mistaken, after Murders in the Rue Morgue. And I say titled because they really had nothing at all to do with Edgar Allan Poe, but there you go. The Black Cat, it's been a little while since I've seen, but I remember that one was a particularly dark movie. And so you summarize that, and then you get into The Raven, which was made in 1935. So now I'm picking up, I'm reading from your article here. Karloff and Lugosi are cast more to type in their next co-starring venture. Although Karloff again gets top billing, Lugosi is much more the dominant villain here, playing Dr. Richard Volin, an arrogant surgeon so obsessed by the works of Edgar Allan Poe that he's built a secret torture chamber beneath the luxurious mansion, complete with a working recreation of the infamous swinging blade from Poe's The Pit and the Pendulum. Volin is as evil as Dracula, and Lugosi revels in the character's sadistic malevolence. So, let me pause there. I rewatched this. I think I rewatched this for the first time since I was a kid when Svengoolie showed it, maybe 6 months ago. I hadn't seen it since I was a kid. It doesn't seem to be one that gets out there quite as much as some of the the more famous ones. It had been a long time since I had seen it, and then I rewatched it again last week. I don't know what your experience was as a kid, but here in Indianapolis we had our own local horror host. His name was Sammy Terry, and he was all about showing all those all those old films. It may very well be that The Raven was one of the very first ones I actually watched, and it was probably at midnight or something along those lines, because that's when they put them on. And the two images that I still remember that were confirmed when I rewatched it was Bela Lugosi's evil laugh behind the grating as he's tormenting poor Karloff after the surgery that's messed up his face, and I could remember that one moment, and that stuck with me all through my life. And then, rewatching it was it's always neat when I rewatch something that I haven't seen in a while, and I'm like, did I imagine that, or was that really as creepy as I remember? And indeed it absolutely was. And the other memory I have was of the father strapped down on the table as the pendulum is slowly coming down on him. And again, I think you heard Lugosi's laugh or comments as that was happening. That was all I could remember about the movie until I rewatched it recently. So what was your history with the film before having to write the article, I suppose?
Oh, well, yeah. Well, again, my history goes back into, decades. I grew up outside Seattle, and yeah, in Seattle, we had Nightmare Theater, and it ran at 11:30 Friday nights on Channel 7, and it was hosted by a guy called The Count, played by a guy named Joe Toomey. Yeah, I think everybody had their local horror movie host. Mine was The Count. He was on Nightmare Theater. And I remember actually Nightmare Theater would show two movies. The first one would start at 11:30, and the second one would start at 1 o'clock. And pretty much the entire time I was growing up, I was allowed to watch the 11:30 movie. I was not allowed to watch the 1 o'clock movie, which of course went on till 2 or 3 in the morning.
About 3 or so, yeah.
Yeah, because my parents did actually wanted me to wake up the next day and not be a zombie all day on Saturday. So the general rule of thumb was, you can watch the first one, Greg, not the second one. Yeah, Nightmare Theater ran all the classical Universal movies. So that's how I grew up on them. My dad loved those movies, so I got it from him. He made a point of making sure I was exposed to all the classics, not just the Universal flicks, but also, The Creature from the Black Lagoon, Tarantula, The Day the Earth Stood Still, etc. I also read avidly growing up. I was what they call these days a monster kid. There was a generation of us baby boomer monster kids who grew up on, Nightmare Theater, Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine, which I subscribed to religiously, made the plastic Aurora monster models, and we can squeeze Dark Shadows in here somewhere too.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, so I knew of. I can't remember the first time I saw The Raven. It was surely on Nightmare Theater one night, along with, and growing up reading books about the history of horror films. And, since then I've watched it again. And indeed, a few years back, honestly, when they approached me at Museum Monsters to write an essay, I was looking for a topic, and my brain didn't know where to begin at first because it was such a big topic. I zeroed in on, Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi, wouldn't it be fun to write an article about all the movies they did together, which would be a nice way to compare and contrast them. Because I find, unfortunately, as time goes by, and I mentioned this in the essay, there's sort of a tendency for the popular imagination to smoosh them all together into, old-time horror guy, Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi, Lon Chaney, that old-time horror guy, Bela Lugosi Chaney Jr., him, So I kind of wanted to make a point. They're very different actors who had very different styles, and this gave me an excuse to go out and get a box set and get pretty much all of their movies together and rewatch them all again. And of course, like you, in anticipation of this meeting and this interview, I went and rewatched The Raven again, which I actually had on DVD.
Okay.
I've got a nice little box set that has most of the Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi collaborations on it, and I knew it well growing up and reading countless articles about it in Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine, which was pretty much the Bible for us baby boomer monster kids growing up. And, we learned the history and who Jack Pierce was and which of these movies. So yeah. Although I was glad I had actually seen, I think, I'd watched The Raven a few years back, obviously to write this essay, but it was fun to watch it again, just details of the plot. I had completely forgotten about this secret bedroom that is actually an elevator that goes down into the torture chamber,
Yeah. That was cool.
Wow, that's snazzy. And again, we should mention that even though it is called The Raven, based on allegedly, I think the credits say, inspired by the poem by...
Right.
It bears no resemblance. The poem by Edgar Allan Poe is one thing, not a short story, it's a poem. And I'm pretty sure there's no insane plastic surgery disfiguring a, fugitive and turning him into a freakish Frankenstein. No, that they have Bela, recite the poem a few times, and we even get an interpretive dance routine based on the poem in the movie.
Right.
But all of the Universal Poe movies are tenuously connected to the Poe story as best.
Absolutely.
We should also mention one of the ironies of The Raven, of course, is back in the 60s, there's another movie called The Raven, written by Richard Matheson. Notice how this all comes together.
It all ties together.
Which also stars Boris Karloff.
Yes.
Which causes no end of confusion. I remember growing up, this was a source of endless frustration to me because the TV guide listings never got it right. Is this the Raven starring Boris Karloff from 1935, or the Raven starring Boris Karloff from 1964, which are completely different movies with completely different plots. And honestly, you tuned into Nightmare Theater not knowing which one you were going to get,
right,
because the odds that the TV guide listing was correct was,
And to be honest, there was probably a time in my life where I very much became a fan of the later color one. And there was probably a time where I was like, did I imagine there was an older one? And it was kind of tough back then for me to prove that whether I accurately remembered that Sammy Terry showing way back when or not. John,
both starring Boris Karloff, separated 30 years apart.
Yes, exactly.
But one is with Bela Lugosi and one is with Vincent Price. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. John, what do you remember way back when?
Well, I remember the 30s one coming on Sammy Terry at some point and watching it. And I'm a big Poe fan, so I started really early, probably earlier than some people might think I should have, reading Poe. I was not in double digits in age, and it was interesting. It was a chance for me to see the actors that I really loved, Lugosi and Karloff, because I loved Frankenstein and I loved the Dracula film. And those were staples in the horror community, and for me in particular, along with Lon Chaney Jr.'s Wolfman and The Mummy. And just like you, Greg, I had the models that you put together, and I also had those paint by numbers things that had the werewolf, and I was a monster kid, yes, very early on. I do remember the 60s version more. And I think maybe because it was color and because it was a lot of things going on, and yes, Boris Karloff was in that one, and a very young Jack Nicholson had a role in that one, and that was like, when I didn't recognize him when I saw it because I didn't know who Jack Nicholson was at that point. But then I was like, wow, okay, Jack Nicholson was in that. That was him,
Peter Lorre's son, no less.
Right. And I'm like, oh, wow, and it's just like that old Burt Lancaster film. He's sitting there talking to somebody, and here comes this guy who's a waiter, and it's Harrison Ford as like a 20-year-old kid. And you can tell it's Harrison Ford because it looks like Harrison Ford. But back then, you know, if you saw that movie, you're like, who the hell is Harrison Ford? And then, you know, Star Wars come out, and then it's like, that's the big, although he was in Kentucky Fried Movie, I believe, one of those Landis films back in the day. He was most recognized when Star Wars came out. So you see all these actors coming out, and you know, but the film in and of itself, as you said, bore no resemblance really to the poem, and you know, but it was a story, and it was a horror story on Sammy Terry, and I was all in just because of that, and you know, it was interesting. I again, at this time that I was seeing this, I wasn't even in double digits yet, and I was going to the bookmobile. Yes, I'm dating myself, and getting the little digest with the Poe stories in it, and you know, just devouring that. I mean, that was just something that I read out. I mean, I must have read the Cask of Amontillado about a dozen times. You know, and I read the poem The Raven a dozen times, and I, you know, I just devoured Poe. But the films themselves, to me, were, that wasn't Poe, that was just a monster movie. You know,
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
it was entertaining in and of itself, but you know, when it comes to Poe, it was more or less, you know, I prefer to read Poe as to watch anything associated with his work. That's just me.
Well, yeah, I think, in particularly, like I said, with the Black Cat and the Raven, and I'm talking about the old black and white Universal movies with Boris Karloff and Lugosi, you pretty much come to it throwing Poe out the window here. You watch those movies because they're cool old Boris Karloff and Lugosi horror movies.
Right.
The pretense that they are based on Poe was just, you know, I suppose I would give the Raven this. The Raven arguably milks the Poe thing rather more than the Black Cat, or the Black Cat, which is a movie about, you know, an insane Satanist in an ancient Hungarian castle, which again is not the Poe story.
Right.
You know, just throws in a Black Cat occasionally to justify the title.
Mm-hmm.
The Raven, at least, Bela Lugosi's character is portrayed as being a guy who is weirdly, psychotically obsessed with Poe. So, okay, you know, and to the extent, again, they drag in the pendulum, and he's got a stuffed raven in his, he's constantly going on about Poe, you know, and everything. So it's about a, you know, movie about a crazed Poe fan. So there, at least to a, you know, that's not as tenuous as, say, the Black Cat, where, okay, let's just throw a Black Cat in somewhere and
Right.
get a whole new story. And, but yeah, you know, you watch that movie you watch The Raven for Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi, and that's actually a movie where, you know, they're both in very fine form. There's, as I mentioned in my essay, in some movies they're played against type. Some kind of movies are better than others. In that one, yeah, Lugosi, who plays the crazed evil surgeon obsessed with Poe, is in fine, malevolent Bela Lugosi mode. He, enough so that, you know, you remember his sadistic laugh 30 years later from childhood.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Yeah, I make the point in the article that Lugosi and Karloff actually had two very different techniques. That Lugosi was like fine at doing sinister and malevolent and inhuman, and, you know, just, Lugosi did not go for pathos, you know. He was just evil, you know. Karloff's whole thing was to kind of like make you play these sort of pitiful monsters who were fierce and terrifying, but, you know, had this dollop of humanity. And again, in the Raven, again, Lugosi is the evil plastic surgeon, and poor Karloff plays this escaped fugitive whom comes to Lugosi hoping for a new face, and Lugosi turns him into a disfigured Frankenstein-like monster. And, you know, there's this pathos when, you know, he receives his horrible new face and everything. So, Yeah, Karloff was all about making you feel some sympathy for the monster, where Lugosi was just great at embodying pure malevolent evil. And this movie plays to both of that with, your heart kind of breaks for Karloff, even though we're told he once put an acetylene torch into somebody's face, which is a horrible image for a 1930s movie. You don't see it, but they talk about it,
Yes.
But yeah, so you see both of them. If you want to see Lugosi and Karloff, in their prime and sort of playing to their strengths, that's one of the virtues of The Raven, the 1930s version.
Yeah. And I guess I'm wondering, watching it now and thinking back to, as you watch Universal films, how do you see this film ranked? I actually think it's very strong. It's surprisingly strong. I think most of the performances in this are extremely good. Like you said, Bela Lugosi's playing very much to his strength. So is Boris Karloff. I thought they were very well used, and it's a really quick hour for me. I find it it's one that holds up quite well compared to a lot of the movies from that era.
Yeah, it's not creaky at all. It zips along. It's actually nice. It's nice, a sort of nice, good learned sort of pulp melodrama. I mean, it's got these audacious twists. Like again, okay, what 90-year-old spoiler alert here. There's a scene where Bela has lured people to his mansion, which is equipped with, of course, secret passageways and death traps and everything. He actually puts the heroine who he is lusting after in this bedroom, and the bedroom itself turns out to be an elevator that lowers itself,
Right.
into the torture chamber. She runs the door and opens up, and it's, oh my God, the whole night. Wow, it takes great planning to rig, a guest room that actually lowers itself into the torture chamber. It's great fun. It's not one of the great masterpieces. But fun B level. It's a very fun B movie that still holds up very well. It's got some. I was joking on Facebook the other day that watching it again, I think Bela sets a record for using the word torture the most time in a single movie.
Torture.
Yeah. I see. He's also, I love torture. I have tortured you because I am tortured. You tortured me, so I will torture you. Torture, Tobe, Poe. He was tortured soul. I swear every word out of his mouth is torture. So there's something kind of weird about this guy.
Right.
I actually mentioned that there's some attempt in the movie to imply that he's been driven insane because of his unrequited love for the heroine, but honestly, I don't buy it. I mean, this is a weirdo who has built a torture chamber to his house. He has, you watch something like Mad Love, which is another old horror movie from the same era as Peter Lorre, and you can buy that, Laurie sells the pathos and that he's tortured by love. No, Lugosi just wants an excuse to torture people. He's obsessed with this woman, but he's actually just, even before he meets the woman who he allegedly is obsessively in love with, he's decorated his house with ravens. He's, built a torture chambers in his basement, I don't think you could really blame her for, he would have been fine if she hadn't rejected him. No. He was messed up long before, it's like, he's kind of a lecturer here,
Yeah, he had the torture chamber before his love was unrequited, if I'm not mistaken. So
yes, he's apparently had built the secret passageways and elevators. And, well, even in the first scene when they come to him and, oh my God, the girl has been injured in a horrible car wreck, and you're the only surgeon in the world who can save her. He's like, how is that my problem?
Yeah, right.
So right from the beginning, he's not okay. This is not a sympathetic character, and indeed, the only way they finally get to him is by appealing to his ego. Well, if there's other doctors, you're the only one who can do it. Really, I'm the only one. Oh, okay. Well, that case, So yeah, okay. So he's an egomaniac and cold-blooded, and even before she, he allegedly falls for this woman who, is married, engaged to somebody else,
Right.
And he jumps pretty quick to, oh, I love you, I must have you too. I'm going to put you in my death trap torture chamber and smash you between these closing walls. Okay, and crunch your bones for all eternity.
It is kind of a contradiction, isn't it? And yet it's played so dark and serious. I mean, there's not much winking at the camera at all. I think, unlike some of the later Universals, I thought it took its premise.
It's very pre-code. You mentioned the Black Cat is, if anything, even darker.
Yes.
But, we're in the sort of the pre-code area here where, oh, Jesus, he's, we hear about Karloff's character taking an acetylene torch to somebody's face. Lugosi's going to slice people in half. Look, and even the whole sequence that, oh, I'm going to go in and deliberately disfigure Boris Karloff and make him a hideous freak. Because, and then laugh diabolically when I show him his face in the mirror, Ooh, this is nasty stuff.
Yeah. John, what did you think when you watched it?
Well, I think that I find that when I talk about older black and white films, I can't compare them to anything else but like films.
Yeah.
So it's kind of difficult for me to say if something that's in black and white really aged well, because all of those films were kind of, well, not kind of, they were very different from the movies I saw in real time growing up and into my adulthood. But as a black and white film, I still enjoyed it on the rewatch. And so I put into those little precarious situations when I'm talking about older films. I feel like unless I'm talking with you, RJ, and now hopefully you, Greg, that I'm speaking a foreign language, because people are looking at me like, oh, you watch those old things? Why you watch that? And it's like because this nostalgia, but also they were good stories, and despite the fact that they're dated in that period, they're still good stories, and I can appreciate that. So when it comes to horror movies of this type, I really enjoy them for what they are. And this one, I feel, when I rewatched it, I still enjoy it. I still enjoyed watching it.
Yeah, I have a rule basically that is, meet a movie on its terms, if you can do that, if you can. And compared to other, I'm comparing this to other Universal horror films of that era, and I was surprised how strong it was. And I agree. I absolutely agree with you, John. I think that there seems to be not everyone seems able to do that. I have 3 kids here, and one of them has my love of these old creepy films, and the other 2 just really kind of don't get it, and that's okay. I figure maybe it's a maturing thing and they'll come around at some point, but I've got my one daughter, and we'll sit and we'll watch these old things and enjoy the heck out of them, and I guess that's good enough. But a lot of people tend to kind of compare it to what's out there in modern, and I don't think that's really the best way to try to appreciate these on their own level. But contemporary to when it came out, I was surprised how, in my opinion, I thought it was extremely strong, and it holds up very well.
Yeah, you have to bring different expectations if you're watching an older movie, because they were filmed differently, they paced differently.
Yeah.
It's like if you are in a mood, if you're in the mood to watch, a Marvel movie, you don't put on an old Greta Garbo film,
Yeah, absolutely.
You come to it expecting this is going to be a classic black and white movie. But yeah, there's an entry ramp. I will say some are quick years, some age better than others. But yeah, when I'm talking to so many people ask me to recommend horror movies for their kids, or even for themselves, I'll throw in, okay, well, what is their tolerance level for older stuff?
Right.
I actually had a comment with discussion, oddly enough, I'm digressing here, of a sister-in-law recently who wanted to expose her kids to Hitchcock. And she went, well, yeah, actually, I probably only have one shot at this. Which one would you go? And yeah, and you have to be realistic here. I mean, you want to be, oh no, in an ideal world, everyone would be able to appreciate old black and white movies. Kids would be able to appreciate old black and white movies on their own terms. And it was like, no, okay, let's think about this for a second. I very quickly, okay, let's eliminate all the black and white stuff. It's great. I mean, I love Strangers on a Train. I love Shadow of a Doubt. But if you're trying to get modern day 21st century kids hooked on, Hitchcock, maybe that's not the one to start with. I actually recommended Rear Window, which is color. It actually moves around, but it's brightly paced. The plot isn't dated. Oh, there's a guy spying on his neighbors. He sees a murder.
Mhm.
That doesn't require any sort of cultural updating.
I know you'll be shocked to hear this. That's actually my favorite Hitchcock.
I think if I had to expose someone to a Hitchcock movie, that's the one. And indeed, I would recommend. Not even Psycho, because Psycho is like, we all love Psycho, but for a generation grown up on modern horror slasher movies, it might seem too slow or tame.
Yeah, and another thing about Psycho is I think everyone knows the twists because they're so ubiquitous to pop culture. There's no surprises.
I mean, how many times has it been redone? I mean, there's that. I'm glad. I would like to jump in on this segue with Hitchcock, because my first inclination would be my two favorites, which you mentioned one of them, Rear Window. The other is The Birds. Now, granted, the special effects aren't really like what you would see today, but to me, the whole pacing of the movie and the interaction of the characters really is something that stood out for me. And that was actually the first Hitchcock film that I exposed my children to. My son couldn't give two flying hoots about anything, but my daughter was like, "Oh, that's pretty cool," So, like RJ, yes, there's, I don't know, certain kids can gravitate to it and others don't, and that's fine.
Certain adults have a bigger tolerance for putting their brain back and realizing that it's old.
Right, but I will add this as an addendum to what I had said before. When it comes to watching older films, any film in general that I did not see is, I would say, prior to any film that I saw prior to my 25th birthday. I didn't have enough living in me to really appreciate them on a mature adult level. And you're going to watch a film at 8, and then you're going to watch a film at 15, and then you watch a film again at 25. You're going to have a different perspective on that film at those different ages. After 25, usually, if anything, you become maybe slightly more cynical and jaded, but if you keep your sense of adventure, like I think I have, you still come out enjoying it, but you enjoy it on a different level, and it becomes that old nostalgia, because then you're going back to way back when. Before 25, there was no way back when, because I had just gotten to a quarter century mark. So, there was no way back when. But when you get into 30, 40, and 50, then you can say, oh, I remember way back when, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, or even 20 years ago. And then that becomes something of nostalgia. At 15, what was nostalgic for me, really? Yeah, Sammy Terry, but I mean, the time frame hadn't really passed enough to where I had gotten the maturity to relate to the characters on those levels. A kid seeing an adult act, well, you don't know as a kid what being an adult is about. You can only just follow the story and do the best to enjoy it. As a teenager, you kind of like, okay, well, I can kind of understand a little bit more about what they were thinking and why, but you're still a little bit out of it. As an adult, then you're like, oh, I get it now, and then you can relate to those adult characters. But now you can also relate to some of the children's characters because you were a child once upon a time. I think being 50 is a sweet spot for all the nostalgia in the world and all the things that I love, because I can look back on it and laugh. I can look back on it and get excited, and I can look back on it and reevaluate it and put it into a very unique perspective at this point in my life.
Very well spoken. So yeah, my feeling on it, you know, the Universal films, whatever people may say of them, they were the first universe, the first film universe. Something that had been pointed out a few years ago that kind of made me do a double take, but I realized that's absolutely correct. It wasn't planned, obviously, but by by virtue of making sequels after sequels after sequels, that's what they ended up making. And you know, how many film companies now are trying to replicate that sort of thing and failing at it, including the actual Universal studio itself. So
yeah, Frankenstein meets the Wolfman is like it's possibly the first one there, because it's interesting because Frankenstein Wolfman is literally a sequel to the first Wolfman movie.
yes,
And it's also like the fourth movie in the Frankenstein sequence, and it references both characters, plot lines. And at least at that point, they were kind of paying attention to where was the Wolfman, where was this storyline,
right.
And even though they're using the same actors in both movies, sometimes playing multiple different characters,
Yeah.
And then they picked it up in the Abbott and Costello. They picked up some of the beats of what happened with those characters in those other films, and when Abbott and Costello actually encountered them, which I thought was really neat. And to RJ's point, I think when it comes to cinematic universes, the Universal back in the day were the only ones. They weren't only the first ones to do it, but they were the only ones to do it successfully to the point that they did, until of course Marvel came along, and then they took Universal's blueprints, and they threw it and put it into a whole different ball game, and now everybody's trying to catch up to them, and this is kind of funny that happened that way.
I would argue that in between Universal and Marvel, you also have Toho.
Godzilla, yeah. Sure.
Where again, remember Mothra and Rodan, everybody all got started in their own solo movies and eventually started crisscrossing into each other's films,
Right.
I'm not at
Godzilla cinematic universe,
Yes. Yeah, and then they even threw in Godzilla and Kong, and and
Ghidorah was popping up in different people's movies,
Right. The one, I'll say this, the one that I always wanted to see that a lot of people didn't, but I always wanted to see it because I liked both monsters, was Godzilla versus Gamera, which I didn't like Gamera, but I thought Gamera was kind of cool because I thought, look, it's a flying turtle with huge saber teeth.
I very much enjoyed Gamera back in the day. Yeah.
I have two stories, but I actually have a T-shirt, which is a Godzilla versus Gamera T-shirt, which I think I was wearing 2 days ago. Sadly, it would never ever happen because Gamera was a different company. Gamera is Pepsi to Godzilla's Coca-Cola. So
right.
The other story, one day I was at a Walmart and I saw they had a box set of like the complete Gamera movies, and I could not resist, so I picked it up. And I still remember the cashier just kind of like, what the is this? And I go, what? And I'm going, that's Gamera the Flying Turtle.
Duh.
And there was this kind of look of extreme dubiousness, like, what? Clearly not someone who had grown up on Gamera movies. Okay, and I had to, what is Gamera the Flying Turtle? Right. Okay, that'll be $9.99. Okay, But they did a double take.
That's how I act modern music. Yeah. So my grandkids and my kids will talk about people, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know any of these people. Where's Earth, Wind, and Fire, and Queen, and and Journey, and
Sure.
You know what? I had that experience. I went to a convention back pre-pandemic. There was sort of partly sci-fi, partly anime. And again, I mentioned I'm clueless. I walked around and it was like there were all these amazing cosplayers and all these amazing costumes. And I'm like, I don't know who any of these characters are. I'm like,
That has
where are the
happened to me.
Klingons? And every so often I would see something, oh, Harley Quinn, thank God, I know who she is, you know. Oh, good, Princess Leia, thank God, I know who she is. But 99% of them, I was feeling very, you know, okay, I am clueless. I don't know who any of these characters are. And it was very weird to be at a science fiction convention, to be walking around and, you know, as I joke, you know, not to play up, you know, my geriatric status too much, you know, I remember when Logan's Run costumes were fashionable at Star Trek at science fiction conventions. Okay, you know.
I was young, but I remember that as well.
Yeah, I remember coming back and at school and talking about it, and just like all of those different little, I guess you would say they weren't the most popular like Star Trek or Star Wars, but they were those other science fiction and fantasy films of that era that, you know, geeks and nerds like us would be like eating up, you know. And of course we know about Logan's Run and you know, and Crawl and all of that, you know, that was the thing. But you know, when you back then it was like, you know, you either were the kid that was into that kind of thing or you weren't. Now you've got all the jocks who are into the Marvel movies and all the other stuff, and then it's like, you know, now it's a good time to be a nerd because then you can talk to just about anybody about some of this stuff, and they kind of know what you're talking about, and they're not looking at you too crazy, provided it's more modern stuff, not the old stuff that we've been talking about.
You know, I was walking through our local grocery store not too long ago wearing my Godzilla versus Gamera t-shirt, and some perfect stranger was, hey, dude, cool shirt. So, hey, you know.
There you go.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I remember going to a grocery store. I was wearing my old school Avengers t-shirt. And by old school Avengers, I mean John Steed and Emma Peel.
Yep, still in mourning.
And I could tell the cashier was giving me this look like, where's Iron Man and the Hulk? You know?
Yep. Still in mourning over Diana Rigg. That was a blow.
Yeah.
But I was gonna say, you know, just in case anyone is trying to mention this in the comments, I am aware that there's a new set of Gamera films that are much more modern, and apparently he's made kind of a comeback in Japan, and I hope to see those one day. But yeah, the ones I'm familiar with are from the 50s and 60s that would have been shown in the same place. It would have been on the same late night horror film of my youth when that was when I got it hooked on Gamera. But
I will mention just briefly on the shared world thing. I had a flashback. I remember talking about just how excited I was when Destroy All Monsters opened at the local theater as a kid. Destroy All Monsters was like the Avengers Infinity War of Japanese monster movies. And I remember just seeing the ads in the newspaper, because this was back when you actually had newspaper movie listings in the newspaper. Oh my God, you know, Godzilla, Ghidorah, Mothra, Rodan, and you know, every other. That was the movie where they put every single Japanese giant, what we now call kaiju monster, in one movie, and I was like, wow, that was, my jaw was just dropping. That blew my whatever age, you know, 12-year-old mind or something. I could not wait to see that movie. Okay, you know.
Absolutely.
So that was the shared word. That was the Infinity War of my childhood. Going to see, you know, Destroy All Monsters of all the Japanese.
Probably not that different from not the last, not Kong versus Godzilla, but the one before that.
Oh yeah, King of Monsters.
King of Monsters.
Yeah,
Godzilla,
very similar if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
wow, we went down some rabbit holes here.
So this is where I should mention, just to bring us, you know, hey, I did write a Godzilla novelization, and yes, I was my inner fanboy was very excited to write a Godzilla novelization. You know.
Oh, tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, that was just that was fairly recent. That was the 2014 movie. the first of
Oh,
the
that's
current
right.
cycle of Godzilla movies.
I did know that. That's right.
Yeah. And no, that was actually a case where simply there's no exciting story here. I wrote it for Titan Books and for the same people for whom I had done Dark Knight Rises, I had done Man of Steel. I was, part of their stable of novelization writers. So when they came and told me, "Do you want to do Godzilla?" Again, there was like, "Well, let me talk to my agent. We'll negotiate a deal." Oh my God, Godzilla, Godzilla, And I had a lot of fun there. Yeah, that was a fun project. I remember they sent me the top secret script. I remember, I'll tell you the code name, because these movies have code names, so no one will know what the real movie is. It was called Nautilus. That was the code name.
Okay. Because I guess no one would care about
kind
that.
of a funny story. I'll tell you this. This was actually a communication breakdown. They said, "Hey, Greg, we're sending you the top secret script. Keep an eye out for it." And like a week went by, and I said, "Hi, I've been watching my email. I haven't gotten the top secret script." And they said, "Well, Greg, we sent it to you." I said, "That's not here." And then it turned out, it's called Nautilus. Well, you didn't tell me that. I just assumed that was junk mail. Here's the thing about code names. You actually have to tell me the code name if the code name is going to work. I got something called attachment labeled Nautilus. I assumed it was spam,
Yeah, that ain't it. Click.
Yeah. So I think they had to reset, but that just, computer wires got crossed there. It's like, oh, but yeah, you see, you got to tell me what the code name is. So if I'm going to watch for it, I know what it is.
Yeah, right.
Well, let me fanboy moment here for a moment with you, Greg. I read that novelization and I enjoyed it. And it was reading that and reading United States of Japan, which is a more recent one that came out, that has inspired me to create my own kaiju offshoot universe, as well. My literary universe is actually a multiverse, so it's kind of like it's going to be a part of the Ivoryverse, but it's just going to be in a different dimension. So it'll be interesting to see. I've got a lot of these things put in my files and little jottings and things like that. But that was a great inspiration to see that novelization of that film, because I enjoyed the film so much. And, it's great to be able to talk to you after having read it. So
I remember the biggest challenge on that book was, of course, I knew what Godzilla looked like, but I didn't know what the Mutos, the massive underground terrestrial organisms, because they were new to that movie. So I remember I was basically nagging the studio to please send me whatever pre-production art, you have on the Mutos, because I didn't. In the script, they were kind of just described kind of vaguely. They're big, they're scary, and I'm like, okay, I know what Godzilla looks like. Please tell me what the Mutos look like. And this is actually the point where I need to stress, this is the common misunderstanding, is I never see the movie first. I'm writing the book novelizations while they're making the movie. So I always describe it as writing a 350-page description of a movie I haven't seen yet. I saw that Godzilla movie when it opened at my neighborhood theater like everybody else.
Right.
I believe at this point, this actually surprises people to find out that, wait, you didn't see the movie? No. They sent me the script and whatever production art I can pry out of, top secret production art I can pry out of them,
Well, and of course they want to get the book out the same time as the movie, so
that's why it can't you can't finish the movie, you go watch the movie and write the book. But
right.
This confuses people. I get these emails like, "Greg, you left out the best scene." Well, that wasn't in the script. I'm sorry. That was an ad-lib. It wasn't there.
Oopsie, right?
Although going back in time, I remember I'm not making fun of people here, because I remember being young and naive and having this conversation with Vonda McIntyre.
Right.
Vonda McIntyre did the novelization of The Bride, which was a remake of The Bride of Frankenstein starring Sting and Jennifer Beals. Terrible movie. But, I remember being young and naive enough to ask Vonda, "So how is the movie?" And she goes, "Oh, I haven't seen it yet." And again, I was young and naive, and it stunned me that she'd written an entire novel based on a movie and she hadn't seen the movie yet, Yeah.
Right.
And now I understand. You know.
Yeah, I actually
Shoe was on the other foot. I understand that now. I'm having to explain that to people. Yeah, no, I hadn't seen the movie yet. You know.
right. So wow, okay.
I did that. I wrote a novelization for a very short film, and I hadn't seen the film. I only read the script for it, and I embellished all of this stuff, which was what the person wanted me to do. And then I saw the film, and then I
Oh yeah.
thought, I really would have liked to see what I've written as the film, or at least added to it. You know what I mean? Because it grounded it a little bit better. At least that's what I'm told.
Yeah. I will say about The Bride that, you know, at least you see an early performance by the great Clancy Brown as the monster. And
He's, as I recall, he's good in it. Honestly, I have not seen the movie in decades. I just remember it being glacially paced and somewhat tedious. You know?
Unfortunately, it's the bride herself that kind of fails, in my opinion. Sting was okay too, but it's worth it. I think it's worth a revisit just to see Clancy Brown playing the monster again. He really does give his all in it. But
my vague impression, again, based again on ancient memories, so you know, take this with a grain of salt, is that they had a good opening act and they had a good ending, and they had no idea what to do in the middle. So there's just what seems like forever of Sting and Jennifer Beals just sort of brooding prettily in the castle.
You remember correctly.
And honestly, and the, you know, and occasionally they actually have to. There's a subplot involving the monster and a dwarf, which is like the only thing that's alive in the movie. And
yes.
So when you have to keep cutting to, you know, the supporting character cast, you know, okay. Meanwhile, back at the castle, Sting and Jennifer Beals are still brooding prettily. Quick! Oh God, where's the dwarf again? You know.
Yes, you remember correctly.
David Rappaport, I believe, is like stills the movie, even from Clancy Brown. You know.
Yeah, yeah, and I would say that that's actually the part worth going to revisit. Yeah, if you have it on DVD, you can just probably skip the chapters.
For what it's worth, I remember again having decades. I remember enjoying Vonda McIntyre's novelization. Okay.
Yes.
Probably more than the movie.
You mean of The Bride?
Yeah, Vonda novelized The Bride.
That's right. Yeah, I did not read her novelization of The Bride, but I generally like Vonda McIntyre. I imagine I would like it. So, swinging back around to The Raven.
We're wandering all over the place here. But,
we did. That was fun, though. I enjoyed that. Thank you.
I had a diverse and eclectic career, so we have many rabbit holes to go down.
You bet. Absolutely, and probably not as much time as we'd like, but that was fun. Contemporary reviews and even reviews of the time of The Raven were not terribly kind to it. I find that a little bit unfair. I think it's, you know, anyone willing to meet it halfway is probably going to find it a pretty darn good movie, and that would be where I would land on it. I don't want to speak for you, Greg. Your article seems to kind of make that same argument, but would you agree or disagree?
I think it is a tremendous amount of fun. I think, you know, if you're going to start rating the Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi movies, The Black Cat is probably arguably more of a classic, you know, probably the more artistic of the films. But no, The Raven is like a good full-blooded, you know, melodrama complete with torture chambers, secret, and like I said, Boris and Bela in fine form. I always liked it as a kid. In fact, yeah, I mentioned it as a kid. I think I even liked it more than the Black Cat. Is when, as I get older, I can appreciate the sort of artistry of it, how it's sort of weird and kinky and sexy and everything. Mm-hmm. As a kid, you know, The Raven was exactly what I wanted from it. It was Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi, a creepy mansion, torture chambers, thunder and lightning. It's exactly what I wanted from that movie, and it still holds up. You know.
Yep, I agree.
I would also say, you know, The Body Snatcher down the road is obviously, again, probably is a classic, great movie. Although that's a Boris Karloff movie in which Bela Lugosi, you know, they have a nice final scene together. One of their best scenes is, but it's mostly a Boris Karloff movie. But again, Body Snatcher is also. I could rant about The Body Snatcher great length. I would argue that's one of Karloff's finest performances.
I am a Val Lewton nut.
Yes.
What
can
a
probably go
surprise!
on.
This is
There's a rabbit hole or a cat hole or a leopard man hole. We could go on for an hour. I love Val Lewton too. Don't get me
yes.
started on the seventh victim. Okay.
Oh yeah, that's fantastic. So yeah, I'm in total agreement. It's not a Universal movie technically, but if you don't know the difference, you probably wouldn't. But The Body Snatcher, not Invasion of the Body Snatchers, The
Yes.
Body Snatcher from 1945 is a great one from both of them. So to summarize, basically the rest of your article follows along their career and their path, and some really good observations about each of their movies, and basically concludes, I believe correctly, that Bela Lugosi probably doesn't get the attention he deserves, and Boris Karloff went on to become the more famous actor all around, probably higher prestige projects, further along than Lugosi did, but that they together made some really great stuff. And those that want to check it out some more, and read more of what Greg has to say about that, and read more about a nice overview of, if you're into all things monsters, this book was hours of entertainment for me. It's called Musings on Monsters: Observations on the World of Classic Horror, edited by Rich Hanley and Lou Tambone, forward by Jim Beard. And that, last I checked, that was available pretty much Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all those places. You can find your copy and check it out.
Perfect Halloween reading.
Absolutely. So I'll just, I've been looking forward to this for a long time. We've been trying to schedule this for a few weeks. We've had some interesting issues along the way. Oddly enough, car repairs got in the way of scheduling this, but I'm super thrilled that you were able to spend the afternoon with us today, Greg. And I look forward to more conversations on Facebook, and maybe we have you back for another one of these little get-togethers in the near future. But it was very exciting for me. I've become a fan very quickly of your work, and I'm anxious to see what else you put out there.
Oh, thank you very much. Like you said, yes, you mentioned, we had real world logistical issues scheduling this, but we're past that now. I'm glad it finally happened. No, this has been great. Obviously I love talking about this stuff, and Star Trek, Godzilla, old Universal monsters. I mean, hell, I was watching Blood of Dracula on Svengoolie last night. Okay.
I have it recorded. I plan to.
But so yeah, we should definitely do this again sometime, and hopefully I will have a new book to plug at some point that I can talk about. So
that would be great. John, are you with us?
I am. And thank you for being on the show, granting us this time with you, and looking forward to seeing what new projects that you have cooking up, and hopefully we'll be able to chat again, and I'll be able to send you a line on Facebook and just, hey, Greg, how you doing? Maybe talk about some old monster movies, stuff that I don't really have a lot of people I can converse with who aren't going to look at me like I'm stupid.
As I sometimes joke, a little part of me died the first time someone said, "Who is Boris Karloff?" Okay.
Yeah.
Like, oh, blow to the heart there, Yeah, we'll have to compare notes on Strange New Worlds when it debuts as well,
Absolutely, definitely want to get you back for some Star Trek stuff. It would definitely be interesting conversations, for sure.
We'll get that book.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, John. Sorry.
No, I was just going to ask, where can our audience reach you, find out more about what you got going on at any given time? You have a website or something you can share?
I have a website. It's a little out of date, but it does have my email address. Plus, I tend to hang out in a lot of sort of just social media. There's the Constellation Facebook page, which is a virtual science fiction convention. I hang out there. There's the Trek BBS, which is a Trek message board. I hang out there a lot, So a lot of the Starlog Facebook page. I'm on social media, a lot of the fan sites, chatting about Star Trek and monster movies and Logan's Run and whatnot. Especially the last year, since I'm actually going to science fiction convention withdrawals, since thanks to the pandemic, this is the longest I have gone without a science fiction convention in probably 40 years.
Did you make one in July or June or any time when it opened up there for a minute?
Not yet. Last convention I went to was like November a couple of years ago. It was a Farscape convention up in New York. I'm hoping to attend a convention in ZakaCon, which is our local downtown convention here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, in March. And then Shore Leave outside Baltimore is my favorite Star Trek convention. It's been virtual the last 2 years for reasons, but I'm hoping they will be up and coming in person again this summer. That's usually around July or August.
Okay, well, I hope that does happen for you. John and I made a couple of small ones, but I was not going to do Gen Con, and I won't be doing Comic Con either. That's a little too crowded for me. So.
Well, in March, I've got my fingers crossed for here, so.
Yeah.
I'm probably mispronouncing it. ZakaCon, or I am no doubt mangling the pronunciation because, like I said, I don't know from anime, but.
Right. Is your website gregcox.com?
No, it's gregcox-author.com.
Okay.
Not to put on airs, but because gregcox.com was spoken for. I think there was a politician in San Diego who had that name. I am not a politician in San Diego, so.
Well, it's funny how you and I have that in common. I went to go create my website, and John F. Allen was taken. It was the name of a bead maker from the early 1900s. They're still around. John F. Allen and Sons. They make beads. So I had to make my address John F. Allen author. So.
Yeah.
Well.
There's also a restaurant critic named Greg Cox, too.
Since we're sharing those kinds of stories, R.J. Sullivan is a printer, apparently, and so I'm rjsullivanfiction.com. That's where you can find me.
The problem is none of us have really exotic names here, but...
Then you got Robert Sawyer, who went with sfwriter.com.
Yeah.
Which was like when the internet was new, I think, was when he secured that one. So,
wow, yeah.
Yeah. So that yeah. And it still is that. I mean, Robert J. Sawyer will work, but it'll ultimately take you to SF Writer. That was really neat.
I always like to think perversely and maliciously that, like I said, the politician in San Diego, that it must have drove him insane that whenever people tried to Google him, they would get Godzilla novelizations.
There you go. Well, thank you so much for taking the time with us today. I look forward to.
Yeah, nice way to spend a Sunday afternoon.
It was a great time. I knew it would be. I knew we'd go all over the place, and that's exactly what happened. And that's okay. Hopefully, people enjoyed it as much as we did.
It was fun.
What do you think, John? Maybe 3 episodes out of this guy?
Oh yeah, 3 definitely going to be 3. Yep, absolutely.
So it'll go up in 3 parts, and that'll be great. I'm looking forward to sharing this, and
I'll share it all around Facebook.
Absolutely, and we'll be getting into the Halloween spirit. Hopefully, seeing some more bad movies that we can talk about later. It's going to be a good time.
Yes.
All right.
This is our season. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, I want to thank our audience for tuning in. As always, we love to hear from you. Please drop us a line. Give this episode a thumbs up and let us know what you think. What do you think about the Raven? What do you think about any of the Star Trek that we discussed? And if you have any questions for Greg, maybe we can relay those questions in the comments to him, and he might be gracious enough to answer. So we'd love to hear some feedback from our audience. So please don't be shy on that regard. And again, you can find me at John F. Allen Author if you want to find out what the latest goings on in my neck of the world is, then that's the place to be. That's the place to go. And then RJ, again, where can they find you?
rjsullivanfiction.com.
All right. Well, it's been great. Thank you, Greg. And also to our audience, before we go, be sure to check out OG Nerds. It's a Facebook community which all three of us belong to. It's great. We have a lot of fun there, discussing all the geeky things in the world that we love. And it's geared towards nerds of a certain age, 40 and over, but over 18 are welcome, just so you know. All right. Well, that wraps up another episode of the Two Towers Talk Show. Again, thank you for listening. And until next time, stay nerdy. The Two Towers Talk Show is sponsored in part by OG Nerds, a new social media community dedicated to nerds of a certain age, 40 and over, although all are welcome. Members are encouraged to share articles and links on their favorite nerdy topics such as animation, anime, art, books, writing, comics, manga, movies, music, sports, tech, science, TV, video games, RPGs, and more. Be sure to visit them on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The Two Towers Talk Show is sponsored in part by Showtime Cinema in Mooresville, Indiana. Their friendly staff is always willing to go the extra mile to make your movie-going experience an enjoyable and memorable one. Enjoy the comfort of their new cushioned seating in their spacious auditoriums, and while you're there, be sure to stop by the concession stand and purchase some popcorn where real butter topping is an option. They're located at 300 South Bridge Street in Mooresville, Indiana. We hope to see you at the movies.